Next from Springfield, we talk one-on-one with Marc Miller, Director of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. While most know IDRN administers the state parks and regulates hunting and fishing, we hear what else IDNR does and how it will now be the lead regulator in monitoring the expansion of fracking in Illinois. This runs about 50 minutes.
Marc Miller, Director of Illinois Department of Natural Resources. Thank you for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
Thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure.
Hopefully this year is better than some of the years in the past. We were talking off camera and I was recollecting when Governor Quinn was new to the governorship and he came out here and announced that the parks that had been closed down by Governor Blagojevich, that Governor Quinn was reopening them. And there's been obviously a lot of tough financial years, as everyone knows, still in many departments. So how is the Department of Natural Resources doing now financially?
Well, we have been working very hard with our constituents. We have been working with the legislators, and I think that's probably the dramatic change for us, is that we have really worked with the community, with the General Assembly, to demonstrate that we have strong professional management at this agency, starting with reopening closed state parks back in February 2009. But we have been demonstrating that, and as a result, we have shown that we're worthy of the appropriations that we have and that we're using the funds wisely. And as a result, we've been able to accomplish a great many things, including a sustainability bill that created a new set of revenues for the agency that will help us recover and start to rebuild.
Now tell us some of the details. When we say, you mean financial sustainability.
Yes.
What are some of the new funding mechanisms and how much money would that mean for you?
Overall, about $30 million that's added on to our existing budget and our general revenue dollars. Most of the money, the bulk of the money, will come to the State Parks Fund, Parks and Conservation Fund, that will be derived from a $2 increase on license plates. Part of the debate was that we needed to have a passport into an entrance fee of sorts into our state parks. And when we went through the process and negotiated and had stakeholders involved, including our concessionaires, they felt that having a state park entrance fee was not conducive for business and for the economy, and we arrived at a $2 license plate increase that allows everyone in the state to have access to our state parks because they paid for it with their license plate.
And as we tape this, I know the governor's office just announced that, I don't remember the exact numbers, but that tourism was way up. Now, not that, you know, for a variety of reasons. Some people are going to plays in Chicago and things around the state, but certainly hunting and fishing and boating are all part of the attraction of the state of Illinois. Have you seen, do you track the numbers of people that utilize the parks, and how have they been going?
We do, and it's been remarkably steady. I think that for park visitorship, we're roughly about $40 million, and 40 million visits, excuse me. And then the correlating economic figure is $1 billion a year of economic impact. Fishing and hunting, we've seen some increases in fishing license sales. Hunting licenses have remained steady, and you know that's roughly a $3 billion economic impact, along with wildlife watching here in the state of Illinois. Overall, the agency has a $32 billion economic impact with all the things that we either promote or regulate, and that's the important lesson that we've been talking about for the last 4 years, is we have a strong economic impact on the state, and that we need to be able to utilize our funds to help promote those activities.
You know, one of the interesting things you just reminded me, when I was a kid growing up, I rarely saw deer. We never rarely saw turkey. I grew up in Missouri, but you know, what strikes me a number of times is the amount of wildlife that we see today that we didn't see 45 or 50 years ago. I mean, look at the bald eagles in Illinois.
Red-tailed hawks, another example.
Yeah, I'll see them often driving down the road. You'll see a hawk sitting on a telephone pole. In fact, I saw in my subdivision the other day, one swooped down and picked up a mouse off a lawn. But what accounts for that? Do you know? Is it
Well,
some program?
Let me first start by saying if you enjoy seeing those animals and river otters and wild turkeys, et cetera, thank a sportsman. What attributes to that is that we've had a sustainable funding source for wildlife and fisheries conservation and management for the last 75 years. It's a federal law that takes an excise tax from sporting goods, puts that into a federal fund, and then the states match that with licensed dollars and get a portion of those dollars. And so for the last 75 years, sportsmen have been putting money into conservation. And you know, part of this is in the environment, part of it is habitat, but part of it is that we have had programs for many, many years, decades, that have reintroduced animals, provided habitat for them, and we're seeing the benefits now of those efforts. And so, you know, now bald eagles are another situation where environmental regulations helped remove an impediment that they were having reproductive issues with DDT being in the thinning the eggshells. But habitat for bald eagles, we see more habitats and have more on surveys now than we ever had before, and actually is a great thing to come into Illinois and see bald eagles in the wintertime. But all of that is because of programs at conservation departments, natural resource departments across the United States. They're utilizing those funds, and I take very seriously our commitment to protect those funds, make sure they're used wisely, and then put them back out on the ground. Another thing, too, is a lot of people think that those dollars that are brought in by sportsmen are dollars that are only used for game animals, the turkey and the deer. But we use those funds for all sorts of wildlife conservation. The river otter is a shining example of utilizing funds back in the 1990s to bring river otters from around the country to Illinois. And they were threatened. They're on a threatened list here, endangered species list here in Illinois. And as a result of our reintroduction efforts in the 90s, they've come back so much that they're actually causing problems with fisheries management because their numbers are so large. So we think those kinds of successes will continue, and because of the funding we have here, we'll be able to do more with habitat restoration and work.
You know, I'm reminded too, the history, we get so far away from the founding of the state and how civilization came in that, you know, in southern Illinois, you had the French fur trappers. And you talk about the otters and the people coming in, that was often one of the original reasons why people were coming in for the pelts that they could get.
That's absolutely correct.
So we've had some success over the last number of years in restoring some of the wildlife. On the other hand, we have a problem with sometimes we get wildlife we don't want. And the Asian carp, I think a number of people have probably seen the pictures. I've not done it myself, but you drive a motorboat up, what is it, like the Illinois River or different places,
the Illinois River,
and they'll be
Mississippi,
jumping out. Apparently the motors stir the Asian carp where they're jumping. What's the problem with them, and what, if anything, can be done to combat their numbers?
Well, first of all, their problem is that they're an invasive species. They don't belong here. They didn't evolve in this ecosystem, and they're creating opportunities for themselves by expanding, getting into the niche of these rivers and streams, and using their prolific spawning capabilities to colonize new areas. And what we're doing with this is they're already in the Mississippi and the Illinois rivers, and what we're trying to do is keep them away from the Great Lakes so they don't invade that ecosystem and all those tributaries. And we've had a great success. Since 2009, my first year as director, we've been combating these fish and working with the federal government, with the White House, with Fish and Wildlife Service, the Army Corps of Engineers, and other partners to keep them from getting into that other ecosystem. In the process, the best way to fight them is to commercially harvest them. And we have had on contract for the last several years commercial fishermen that go up into the upper Illinois River, and we've harvested over 700 tons of Asian carp, pushing back that leading edge. Now,
I was going to ask, what are you doing to keep them out of the Great Lakes? Because I know that's a major concern of some of the other states as well.
Mm-hmm.
And weren't they saying that they wanted to cut off access of the Illinois River to the
That's
lake
right.
to keep them out?
I mean, there was a lawsuit that other states were filing a few years ago that they wanted to close off the navigation locks. But so much of Chicago is built in a floodplain that you would have had flooding, you would have had stormwater concerns, you would have been worrying about how the sewage was going to go away from Lake Michigan, the source of drinking water. You also would have lost a significant amount of jobs and commerce by shutting off the locks. I mean, think about, well, maybe many people don't think about this, but jet fuel, road salt, concrete components, the aggregate that goes through, chemicals from the plants, all go back and forth on that waterway. And our governor has said that we need to take care of aquatic invasive species. We should have ecological separation, but we don't want to do that at the expense of those other uses of the waterway. So we need to make sure we study and move forward. And I think now, 4 years later, we've had such success with professional management, doing monitoring and response with scientific basis for our actions. Things have calmed down. The other states now look to us as examples of good management. And the talk of lawsuits are diminishing, and we're actually working collaboratively more under Governor Quinn's leadership and Council of Great Lakes Governors, working with them more collaboratively to address aquatic invasive species.
I think most people think of, when they think of Illinois and your responsibilities, they think of the landmass of Illinois. But to what extent, speaking of the Great Lakes, do you get involved in managing the Great Lakes as a resource, and where do your responsibilities end relative to that, or to what extent are you engaged on an ongoing basis with your counterparts in other states?
I think, well, we're very engaged with other states, and I have a number of positions or organizations that I work through, but I would like to tell your viewers that it may be a surprise that all the drinking water that comes from Lake Michigan for Chicago is first allocated out to the drinking water sources through the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. We give out the permits to allocate water. We also have a trustee relationship, a responsibility for the bed of Lake Michigan, so that we are responsible for everything. We own the lake bed for future generations, and it's held in public trust by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. That being said, we have a number of programs that we use. I'm a delegate commissioner on the Great Lakes Commission. We work through the Council of Great Lakes Governors, which has been energized by Governor Pat Quinn. We have representation there. One of our success stories in the last several years was being admitted to the Coastal Zone program from NOAA. It allows us to take federal money and work on coastal zone restoration, outreach, education, and just overall environmental health of the coastal area, because we have 63 miles of coast on Lake Michigan. All of those things, we're very involved with that, and our Millennium Reserve Initiative, which encompasses part of this in the south side of Cook County, Chicago, and parts beyond that, is part of the coastal zone, and we have been putting resources into that area to restore the Calumet River area as well.
What are some, it's, my job is interesting because I get to talk to people in different paths. And a couple of years ago, we were doing a behind the scenes at the Field Museum. They actually have a fellow there who is like a librarian for aquatic species. And what was fascinating is he held out a fish in his hand. I mean, it was had been a formaldehyde, but he goes, this fish 5 years ago wasn't in the lake, and now it's the most abundant fish. We, as the average Joe driving by on Lakeshore Drive, you look out on the lake, you might have lived your whole life in Chicago, it seems more or less the same, but below the surface it's very dynamic and things are changing. We talked about the Asian carp as one species, the zebra mussels, something else that's been a problem. How would you assess overall the success of Lake Michigan, and is it threatened more than we realize, or what's the status of it?
I don't want to be alarmist, but it is threatened more than we realize. That fish that he held out was a round goby, and we're very much aware of how it is spread out. It's going down the Chicago Ship and Sanitary Canal into the Illinois River, and it's spreading. And there are 140 different invasive species in the Great Lakes that have been brought in by navigation interests. And every year there's a possibility of getting more.
They basically hitch a ride on freighters coming in, right?
That's right. In the ballast water and then escape when they reach it. And there are things that we need to do on the federal level, and we've been advocating as a state for tougher regulations there.
On the ballast water, you mean?
On the ballast water, and working with the Coast Guard.
Can there be some kind of screens, or I don't know, I mean, what?
Oh, it was a very technical fix of having treatment in the ballast water, and also some of the systems that have been proposed have been to hook up ballast water and drain that through a sewage treatment system to kill organisms before the water is discharged back into the Great Lakes. And so there's a lot of ideas out there, and we need to use the best available technology. But the bottom line is that the Great Lakes and Lake Michigan have been under a dynamic change. It's been very dynamic in terms of the ecosystem, the food web, and we are trying to get a handle on certain aspects of that. Yellow perch is one of the fish that many people enjoy fishing for, but we haven't been able to recruit a good spawn class for a number of decades. It's been several decades where we haven't been able to get two good classes of fish spawning in a row. And that's been affecting the populations. We're very concerned about the crash. And part of that is that something is happening at the base of the food web where yellow perch larvae are getting out and feeding, where they just aren't making it. And it might be zebra mussels and quagga mussels that are taking away the plankton that they would feed on as larvae. So, there's a lot of and young fish, and there's a lot of challenges there, but we need to have a better handle on invasive species and try to do it. And that's why I think DNR's challenge is going to be in the decades ahead, is how we deal with the animals that are considered nuisance species on land, like feral hogs, and how we deal with species coming in through trade, like round gobies and quagga mussels.
I don't know if they're here yet, but just recently, as I drove through the outskirts of St. Louis, one of the things that is amazing, speaking of seeing wildlife that was never there before, you'll see armadillos alongside the highway that have been hit by a car. Now, there was never armadillos when I was growing up in Missouri. It's amazing how wildlife is moving. Now, that's may or may not be a problem, but it speaks to the fact that things are happening relative to wildlife and relative to your job and the mission of the IDNR. And the feral hogs is another one, which people may not even be familiar with that. What is a feral hog and what problems do they present?
Well, feral hogs are either domesticated livestock that's been turned loose, or the European varieties, razorback hogs is a good, Arkansas razorbacks is a good example. They're being released or are migrating into Illinois, and they can carry over 40 different diseases. There are potential crop losses. They'll get into a field and root up an entire field of seed corn or crops, and they're very destructive. And they also will predate and eat songbirds, nesting birds that nest on the ground, and that impacts our game birds as well. So there's a variety of reasons why they shouldn't be here. They're very prolific. If you don't take care of the population, and you have to shoot or trap 70% of that population every year, they start to grow exponentially. And so we're working on a program to trap them and to otherwise deal with them. And I think that our goal is eradication, and hopefully we might be able to achieve that and completely keep feral hogs out of Illinois.
Is it shoot on site that, if you're a farmer or something, or is it a season, or what are we doing relative to regulating it?
One of the challenges is we do not want to have a hunting season that encourages people to participate and advocate for more seasons and more animals. The rules here now is that they're a nuisance species. As long as you have a FOID card that enables you to carry a firearm, you can shoot them on site regardless of the time of year or the time of day. And we need to do it safely, but You can shoot them anytime because we want to get rid of them. But the most effective way to control these species, these animals, is to trap them. And it's the way we've been handling them, and we're able to get whole families, and they don't disperse quite as widely.
How do you trap them?
You set large traps and bait them with corn or other feed, and they get acclimated to going in and out of there to get their feed after a few days or maybe even weeks. And then you enable the trap, and then you can trap a whole family. But they're very
Is this where you shoot a net and it falls over them? Or?
No, there'll be a kind of the trap door kind of thing.
Okay.
They go in, they root around, the trap's been activated, the door will shut behind them, and that will be the best way to trap as many. But what we're finding, because they're so intelligent, that shooting and trapping is starting to get very wary of those things, and so we're going for additional means.
They actually learn what they're doing.
They're very smart, and we're actually deploying Judas pigs, where we trap females, put radio collars on them, and then that leads us to, because of their communal nature, to the other ones. I'm sure you don't want to talk a whole hour about feral
No, I don't.
hogs,
I don't. But it's amazing some of the things, because I was going to ask earlier. Well, first of all, when I don't. We'll get off this. But what do you do with them once you trap them? Are they slaughtered or?
They are slaughtered, but because USDA rules, we're not able to actually put them into the food chain, because what USDA requires for hogs is to have them go to a slaughterhouse, be inspected before they're dispatched. And with a wild animal that's got teeth, very aggressive, it's too much of a hassle for us, and do it safely to transport those alive to a slaughterhouse. So usually we dispatch them and dispose of them, or the landowner will have an opportunity to take them, but we can't put them into the food system as they are.
And lastly, how big of a problem is it at this time, and what areas of Illinois are they hitting?
17 counties in Illinois have this problem. There's sporadically around southern Illinois, northwestern Illinois, Fulton, and Knox County. We've been knocking them back away from there, but the biggest problem right now is along the I-70 corridor. And unfortunately, misguided individuals are relocating these animals and letting them loose along the interstate so that they can have hunting opportunities perhaps later. And that's one of the things we're trying to stop, is stop transporting them. They're very destructive. They cause livestock and crop damage, very destructive to native wildlife, and we need that to stop. But we're working on all sorts of control measures, and we hopefully will keep them from being introduced.
You know, one of the I think people think of you in terms of hunting and fishing, but one of the new areas of responsibility that you were engaged in, one of the biggest issues of this legislative session that just ended, which was, people know fracking, which is the process of putting basically liquid deep underground and to release natural gas and some of the oils. It's been very successful in states like Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania, North, South Dakota area. It's coming out of Illinois. I think a lot of people may be surprised at the numbers. I've heard that the oil companies have already put $100 million into southern Illinois as far as leasing. IDNR is going to be engaged in regulating the process. Why don't you tell us what is your role and going to be? When does it start? Are you putting together the list of rules now for drilling, and you're going to have inspectors? Just walk us through how you're going to get this program going from scratch.
Sure. Well, part of, as you said, most people think of it as hunting, fishing, and camping. We also have mines and minerals, regulate blasting explosives and mines, but oil and gas is another part of our agency where we regulate oil wells. Now, up until this point, we give out permits for well drilling, and that's it. But we needed to have a little bit more regulation to answer the questions for society, is how we address this technology. Now, the truth is that fracking, hydraulic fracturing, has been going on in the state of Illinois for 60 years, but it's been done in vertical wells in sandstone formations. Now, the technology is to drill horizontally and use more volume to fracture more area. And we, under the direction of Governor Quinn, over a year and a half ago, said that we needed something more than what we had in our current regs. And we worked with the legislature, Speaker Madigan's office, and then Leader John Bradley to negotiate this bill. And it was unusual to have industry and environmental groups at the table negotiating along with the state agencies and the legislators. And I think it probably is the toughest environmental law in the country. Setbacks for water, first time ever water coming back out of the ground has to be stored in above ground tanks, not in pits. There are a number of other things with the transparency, have public participation. I think it's a very strong law. What we're doing right now is developing, this is summer of 2013, we're developing the rules. We hope to have those two first notice sometime around the beginning of 2014. So we're going to take this 6 months, and probably need 6 months because it's very technical. Write those rules with input from many of the stakeholders who have been engaged so far, and then go out and get approval from the Joint Committee of Administrative Rulemaking, or JCAR. Hopefully we'll have a process in place by spring. There are a number of folks interested that would like for us to do that faster, and we're going to do everything we can. One of the challenges for us is that this is a large regulatory program that's new, and we're going to be hiring probably around 50 to 55 different professionals in different disciplines to help us with the public notice, with the permit review, the well inspections, the hearing. We'll need hearing officers. All of that's going to take a lot of work and be a big challenge. But the thing is that the dichotomy of jobs versus, worldview that's jobs versus the environment, that's gone. We can have both jobs and protect the environment, and it'll be up to Department of Natural Resources and Illinois EPA to roll out this program and to prove that we can have both jobs and the environment. You mentioned the investment. It's already on the ground. $100 million is probably about right on target for the leases, and there's a great deal of interest and a great deal of potential for jobs, and we want to unlock that potential, help Southern Illinois out with opportunity, but also we want to make sure that their water and their environment remains clean.
Will the drilling, or the fracking, I should say, that would take place, will that be solely in Southern Illinois, and again, whereabouts geographically?
Well, I think that the major play right now, the interest is in southeastern Illinois, Saline, Hamilton County. I think there is some interest in going as far north as Effingham County, Clay County. There may be shale formations there that could be tapped and may produce. All of this is speculative in terms of what might be there. We could find oil reserves in central Illinois, formerly, central Illinois, the Mattoon-Decatur area corridor in between produced oil decades ago, and it might be possible to tap into those. But the shale formations that are thousands of feet underground are the ones that are being targeted for exploration, and we won't really know until they strike oil or gas whether or not this is going to be a productive play.
Do we have any idea? You talked about some of the people that you're going to be hiring. First of all, as far as how will those people, where will the money come for those? What would you say, about 50 new jobs or so? Where will the money be coming to pay for those people, the inspectors and among others?
Well, first of all, Governor Quinn had a line item in the budget for us in his budget address that allowed us to capture funds and then to use those to hire people. The startup money is actually going to be coming from another state agency to help us with that, and we are going to start hiring, get people up to speed and on the program, try to get the program started. Once we start putting permits out there, the permit application process will have a $11,000 permit fee for DNR. And if we assume we have the right number of permits, then we will have enough money for the next several years to hire those people and keep them on and have a strong regulatory program.
Is there going to be any, well, there'll be royalties, or some, in some form or fashion, monies will flow to the state through whatever means, taxation or whatever. I'm just wondering, as you go forward over a 5, 10, 20-year period, that you continue to inspect these wells, IDNR, does IDNR get a portion of that revenue stream to fund those inspectors?
Not yet. And the decision on the severance tax, which is a tax on the production of the well, they've set up the regulatory framework for collecting that tax, but they haven't decided where the funding is going to go to. I think in the next several years, as this plays out, the agency will likely need to diversify its income on this program to make sure that we're doing the regulatory program and continue with inspections and doing the enforcement. If there are going to be thousands of additional wells out there, we're going to need inspectors to go routinely through and check. So I think that that's important, but that is a question for the General Assembly and for the Governor at a future point in time.
I was going to say, yeah, and that was one of the questions. I don't know anyway. Nobody really knows how many wells would be out there, but you think it might be in the thousands. It's not in the 50 range. In other words, it's going to be extensive.
Well, we currently have 38,000 wells in the state right now, and we assume roughly 700, 800 wells a year will be generated by this process. And if they strike oil and are able to make it productive, and that could be sustained for a number of years. But I think that we'll probably see several thousand wells, at least the first several years, maybe. But that's all speculative at this point, there's no real hard and fast way to know how expansive this is going to be until they start getting in and doing the process.
So the best guess, and I know it's a guess right now when you're starting up, it's like anyone who's ever had construction done at their house, they always get a deadline, and then the reality is often something else. But your best guess at this time would be you might be ready to release or have people say give a permit sometime in the spring of 2014, you're thinking?
I think that's a realistic expectation, and I want to manage expectations as best as we can. We'll try to do it sooner, but we want to make sure we do it right, we do it thoroughly, and then we involve our stakeholders. So that may take more time, but I think that spring is probably a reasonable expectation.
And again, for those who don't know, I mean, a lot of people live, well, 2/3 of the population of Illinois is in the Chicagoland area, but southern Illinois has perennially been one of the highest areas of unemployment, and the coal industry has been decimated over the years, so this could be a game changer for that area, as well as, obviously everyone knows the state of Illinois needs more revenues, and to the extent that it creates more jobs, revenues will flow to the state as well.
Absolutely, and what Governor Quinn wanted to do was protect the environment and unlock the potential for those jobs in southern Illinois, because you're absolutely right. This is an area that needs jobs. I mean, the whole state needs jobs, but this area has chronically had problems with employment, and we want to make sure that we do everything we can to help those communities. I think that it also would be wise to invest severance tax money into other opportunities for rural areas, so that that there might be other economies that would come online in the future. And certainly in our state, couldn't hurt us to have a few more state parks. So that's an option, as that the tourism industry probably could benefit by investing even more in an agency like Department of Natural Resources.
The Illinois Channel went down, did a series of stories, which I'd like to do more of, but part of it was to raise awareness around various aspects of the state. The state parks are part of state government, and yet many of these areas, which are kind of the treasures, they're often, unfortunately, hidden treasures. One of the most fascinating places I've ever seen anywhere, and it was in deep southern Illinois, was the Cache River area. south of Carbondale, between the Carbondale and the Ohio River. And it looks like the Louisiana Bayou with the cypress trees growing out of the swamps. And it's just amazing. I mean, there's so many things that I think people, as far as tourism, the aspect of having more, and again, I grew up in St. Louis. I had never heard of it. So I think from the marketing standpoint, on one hand, it's interesting where, as you say, that balance between unlocking the resources, but also southern Illinois has so many really beautiful areas. The Shawnee National Forest, the Cache River Basin.
Garden of the Gods, Mermet Lake, Fern Cliff. There are some amazing places there.
Yeah, Wren Lake, I mean, just from a
another
recreational and boating and fishing standpoint, that are wonderful places to go. So I would say to all the viewers, if you haven't looked at it, you ought to take a look at what's down in southern Illinois. When we would show people some of this, they'd go, "That's in Illinois." So you're right. I mean, there's probably any number of things.
And let me just jump in just quickly. I mean, I've had opportunities to go, before I became director, to go canoeing in the Cache River. And you know, it is absolutely amazing, peaceful, mostly quiet, but you can see some amazing things. And you know, that is certainly a very important area for us, the Cache River State Natural Area. There's a learning center down there, boardwalk over the swamps. You can walk and not have to get your feet wet. But it's just an amazing area that has such great wildlife too. If you've ever seen a promontory warbler, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful bird, very small yellow-green bird with some additional color. You know, those are tremendous places. And you know, we as a state.
And I'll say it's a great place for if you got little kids. I mean, you know,
absolutely.
You know, below 10. I mean, to take them along and run around
And that's the thing. That's our challenge at DNR. And part of the challenge with my directorship is that we know that the trends are changing for outdoor education. The governor often says, "Leave no child inside." We have a challenge competing with video games, computers, the tablets, and everything else that goes on. We need to get our children outside so they can have active, imaginative play, that they can live healthier lifestyles, but the educational value and also having the connection to a sense of place. I grew up going to state parks and camping. Those were our family vacations in the 70s. They were tremendous opportunities for me, and I loved them. And you know, this agency provides that opportunity for people to do that, and we need to continue to invest in that and to provide those opportunities so that children can have a connection to learn and to be healthy, but also for our economy. And I do think that we can do a lot more. Part of the sustainability bill is going to be addressing the staffing shortages and also the backlog of capital projects. We are going to be investing much more in our state parks now that we have that funding. And I'm hoping that we can quickly show and demonstrate that we are doing that. But one of the things that was cut and still has remained to come back is how we're marketing our state parks. And we need to do a better job of that. But it's one of the first things you cut, education, outreach, and marketing. And there are so many places. We have 324 sites, 500,000 acres that are truly amazing places, and people just need to do a little looking to go out and find them and explore some of what Illinois has to offer.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had more time, and you could talk all about that. I mean, just as an example, had a friend from the Springfield area that I drove out and just showed her Lake San Chris. And there's camping right there, and the fact is it's a 20-minute drive more or less from Springfield, and yet you feel as if you went 2 or 3 hours down into the country because there's a park and you could be camping with your kids, you know, right alongside the lake and go fishing with them. And as you said, I did the same thing with my family, went camping. And I think that does plant the seed for an appreciation, not only of family life, but of a love of the outdoors, that as you grow up, you have that with you. So the parks, I would endorse what you're saying, you know, I mean, it really does, I think, carry an educational value in a variety of ways that we don't appreciate when we're kids and being introduced to this.
Yeah. There's another aspect, too, that we haven't mentioned, is that without having that connection to a sense of place, having a strong love of nature or the outdoors or outdoor heritage, you know, we in the future will not have the people who are going to be able to support department and conservation. Where will our next Aldo Leopold or Teddy Roosevelt come from if they don't go out and enjoy the outdoors and to be outside? And so it's part of what we need to do, and we're focused on doing a lot of outreach to kids to get them outdoors. We've created a community outreach program that is targeted where children live on getting them outdoors and exposing them. But we will need to be mindful of that responsibility to pass this on to the next generation, but we also have to pass on the love and the access to the outdoors. And that's been a challenge for us here at DNR.
I got time, Trevor. You just reminded me. I wanted to ask: are there aspects of your job that are surprising? And let me ask, and you can answer it however you want. But relative to what you were just saying as far as exposing the kids, is there any programs for kids who grew up in an urban environment, whether it's South Chicago or something? Mm-hmm. I have some friends at the Union League Club of Chicago. They run the Boy and Girls Camp. They have for decades. And it was almost tragic when you heard one story. Someone was relaying that they asked some of the kids from the south side of Chicago they took up to, in this case, Wisconsin, to where the park was. But they were, well, tragic in the sense of what they were saying is what surprised them is that they didn't hear any gunshots. And the other thing is they didn't know there were so many stars in the sky.
Yeah.
But for these kids who are kind of landlocked or often don't get out of the urban environment, is there any programs designed around them?
Next week, in fact, we're reinstating the Under Illinois Skies program, where we're going to take inner city youth to a state park and give them their first camping experience. We also have our urban fishing program. Thousands of kids every year, tens of thousands, get access to our programming and learn, or just get an opportunity to go fishing. One of the things that I did as director early on was create an office community outreach where we can get into inner city communities and make sure that we represent the whole state and make sure our programming is available. And so we've been doing Leave No Child Inside events all along, some of them several times a week throughout the summer, exposing kids to the outdoors and giving them ideas on how to go outside, enjoy the outdoors, and what's available to them. We've also created an urban collegiate internship program where we're exposing careers. As part of our challenges is that we need to recruit people into the fields of science and to natural resource management, and that also has been a challenge, and we've been working towards that as well. And all of this is wrapped up in the challenges that not just face our agency. That's much too myopic. It's really the entire conservation movement are facing these challenges of not having enough children and women in the outdoors and minorities in the outdoors and in these careers, and then having access. Public recreational access, as beautiful and as wonderful as Illinois is, we're down at the very bottom in terms of lands per capita. And our public access is very complicated. It's not easy for people to go out into a place where they can see the stars. We need to work on those things, and it's not just Illinois, but it's the entire movement of fish and wildlife agencies and conservation, environmental groups. If we don't address these challenges, who will be the next leaders? The next generation will not have the access that they've had or the opportunities to enjoy nature as we have. And we're trying to focus on that. And in terms of your question, that's been one of the toughest things about this, is that we have to deal with the budget, rebuilding the agency, restoring professional management. But the toughest thing is finding ways to reach out and do that work where I know that regardless of which state it is, whether it's Missouri or Arkansas or Wyoming or Illinois, we're all facing these same problems of providing access, providing opportunities to get new people into the outdoors, and then finding our next conservation leaders. That has been very difficult for us, and we've tried a lot of different things, and we make a difference in little ways, but there's no one answer to that problem. And so I think that's been what's surprising for me is that we need to really focus on those key areas, but it's going to take a lot of concerted effort over a long period of time in order to achieve the results that we are going to need.
One of the things that are coming up this summer, and part of that is introducing the population to what you do, is the state fair, where you get people coming into the Springfield area from around the state.
Yes.
You always have with Conservation World, or what are you doing this year, and what importance do you put on a project like Conservation World and the opportunity to educate people about your department at the state fair?
We've always had a very strong result from having programs at Conservation World, and we're mostly focused on children. There are BB gun ranges, archery ranges out there, fishing clinics. We have the fisheries tent with all the aquariums for children to see. And, you know, in the last several years, we've scaled back a little bit to try to reduce our costs associated with that. We may not have as many offerings. But this year, because we've been on much better footing, are putting more resources out there. We're having longer hours again. And we are definitely showing what we do and engaging people in the questions about outdoor recreation and our outdoor heritage. The other thing that we've done that I think is very promising is that in contracting at the state fair, we've learned about how to build partnerships with some of our groups like Pheasants Forever and National Wild Turkey Federation, Ducks Unlimited, and they've all stepped up and have been producing children's programming while here at the fair. And so instead of having a director's tent where programs that I might like to highlight, we now have Pheasants Forever and National Wild Turkeys providing opportunities for kids to play games or to learn about safety or to do some BB gun shooting or something of that nature. And I think it's a very positive thing. And I would welcome everyone to come back to Conservation World. We'll be very happy to see you and to show you what we can do.
Do you know offhand the dates of the fair again?
I believe it starts August 9th and runs, that's a Friday, runs through the following weekend, which I think is going to put us into the 20 range, I think. Very tough for me to come up with that off the top of my head, but we're only a few days. we're only a few days away, really, and we're always looking forward to that.
All right. Well, Director Marc Miller, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.